Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Global Voices. My name is David Parks. I'm the director of the Global Center here at Beeson Divinity School. We do this series, if you're not familiar with this, we do a series called Global Voices. It's almost every week. And I want you to know if you're not a Beeson student and you're from another part of campus or the community, sometimes I get the questions, is it okay for me to be here? Yes, I really, really want you here. I'm glad you're here. And if you're an undergrad student, know that there is combo credit available. Anna Russell will be doing that. She will be in the back later. She has red hair. Just look for the red hair. So again, glad you're here, and I hope that you continue to look us up. Check out our Global Voices series online. Just look up Beeson Divinity School, Global Voices events, and you'll find it. Today, I want to we'll start by thanking the leaders of the Lion's Den, especially Andrew Clark, a friend of mine, who connected us with our special guest today. Now, if you're not familiar with the Lion's Den, it's an annual event held on this campus to promote business's mission, and it's done Shark Tank style. How many of y'all been to Lion's Den? Anybody? All right, you should check it out. As a matter of fact, today is the main event at 4 o'clock from 4 to 6 p.m. You'll have people presenting their projects or things that they're actually doing in business's mission that are helping people in many different ways, including, like I said, our special guest, Rachel Nelson. She's the executive director of the Freedom Business Alliance. She has a 20-year career as a creative director and business consultant for companies large and small. She holds a bachelor's in graphic communication from California Polytechnic University and a master's in ministry leadership from Portland Seminary. She lives in Portland, Oregon with her husband and 3 children. Freedom Business Alliance is a global network of nearly 100 businesses operating in over 28 countries that exist to create employment opportunities for survivors and those at risk of human trafficking. Today, she's going to share with us how they work together to accomplish God's kingdom work. Please welcome Rachel Nelson.
Thank you all for being here today and showing interest in the role that business can play in driving forward God's kingdom to the outer reaches of the world. I am executive director of Freedom Business Alliance, and as the intro said, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I've got a career in business. I thought I'd start out by just giving a little bit of information about how I landed in this role, to go from the world of business to the world of nonprofit ministry. So this is a little photo taken a while back of a real pivotal trip that I made in 2012 to Haiti. I had been invited to speak to a group of single mothers there who were resorting to what we call survival prostitution, who were trying to just make ends meet to support themselves and their children. They had just learned to sew. A group from my church had taken sewing machines, and they had this newfound skill they hoped would allow them to both sew the uniforms required for their kids to be able to enter school, as well as use it as a skill where they could sew uniforms and other things for people as a livelihood. And so because of my business background, I was invited to speak on the topic of business, specifically Proverbs 31, the account of the wife of noble character, who was, yes, a wife, a mom, but also an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, an investor. I had my curriculum, so to speak, all planned out in my head, and when I arrived, woke up the first morning, realized 2 things. One, the Lord put it upon my heart to share my testimony instead of this business training. I realized I had something very much in common with these women. I was a single mother at the time myself, carrying the full weight of financial provision on my shoulders. Hadn't connected those important dots until that very moment God opened my eyes. And had been on a bumpy road up to that point, but God had given me promises of protection and provision, and he said those promises are for these women as well. So I abandoned what I thought I was there to say and began to prepare my testimony, something that I'd never shared or delivered before. I also came out to my host family to greet them in the morning. They said there had been rioting in the streets. Someone had been murdered. There was a kidnapping. We were to stay put for that time, which gave the perfect opportunity for me to sit with the translator to share my story so she could deliver it to the women we were going to meet later in the week. When I delivered it, they were very attentive to the story. I think it cut across their expectations for the experiences of a white, middle-class American mom, and saw that common ground. I felt led to make an invitation for them to commit their lives to the Lord, and 7 women came before and did so. And it was at that moment, it was entirely otherworldly to me, because I'd never done such a thing in my life, that I could see how all those bumps in the road of my life could be used to create a pathway to Christ, and that God would not only redeem my story, but be redeeming the stories of these women as well. And I decided I'd never return to business as usual ever again, and directed my business skills and experience toward helping women in these similar situations that I discovered. While the situation there for this group of women looked a particular way, similar factors, influences, and vulnerabilities led to different forms of what trafficking looks like all around the world. Because of a project I launched while I was in seminary, I was connected in with the Freedom Business Alliance. And I will say, I graduated seminary just 2.5 years ago, May of 2019, from a seminary similar to this one, interdenominational evangelical seminary. And I was a little bit of a fish out of water, you know, a mom, 3 kids, coming from the world of business, not feeling called to be a pastor. I think it put me as a little bit of a minority, let's just say, among the student population. But God had plans that He made abundantly clear. And just a few months after graduating, I stepped into this role of executive director with Freedom Business Alliance. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what our organization does. But the best way to understand it really is to see the stories of survivors who our businesses serve. And so we're going to watch a little video that I think will give you insight into what the situation is like on the front lines of freedom. So as we dive into this, I always like to start here. It's a verse that the Lord brought to me the night before I was traveling to Haiti by myself, feeling very uncertain about what lied ahead. I opened my Bible, and it was to this verse here in Isaiah. Only later did I connect the dots that this was the very same verse Jesus cited when He was proclaiming His public ministry. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners. I hear this verse over and over again from the leaders of freedom businesses as really their sense that they are joining alongside and furthering that public ministry that Jesus announced here. And the interesting part is this verse connects 2 different ideas, poverty, captivity, that I think aren't often connected together, but the freedom business movement is uniquely poised to address. The roots of captivity in the form of human trafficking often start with the vulnerability created by extreme poverty. The global crisis. Like I said, that small group of women that I met there in Haiti, I didn't realize at the time, was experiencing and struggling with what truly is a global crisis that looks different in different regions, but is driven by the similar dynamics. Today, there are over 40 million people trapped in modern slavery. It's a staggering figure. But really tragic as well is that 80% of those who are rescued by organizations like IJM end up being re-trafficked if they don't have an employment opportunity, safe job, after they are both rescued and maybe spend some time in restoration, receiving services, because the root cause has not been addressed, where the things that made them vulnerable to traffickers in the first place, lack of education, training, now they still have that situation, and they're dealing with post-traumatic issues that do not make them the most ideal employees. And so this is a cycle that freedom businesses seek to stop and sustain the freedom of those who are employed. Here's how human trafficking happens in a very simplistic view for those who aren't familiar with how does this even occur. Because oftentimes in this country, while there is a trafficking issue here, we are blind to it. So traffickers buy and exploit people who are vulnerable because of extreme poverty. Sometimes it's even desperate families who either sell or hand over, and it's oftentimes their daughters, to employers promising job opportunities that turn into the most nightmarish job you can ever imagine. Once they have that control, they use all sorts of tactics to maintain that control. And oftentimes there's an ever-increasing, escalating abuse that happens in those situations. It does require the work of rescue organizations. Even though there is this re-trafficking that happens, it starts by being rescued. Restoration organizations then provide counseling and rehabilitation. But after this counseling that can last, upwards to maybe a year and a half, the question is, how are they going to support themselves? And so the need for training and dignified jobs is vital to the comprehensive solution to this global crisis. And that's where we come in. So our member businesses are those that are creating job opportunities for survivors of human trafficking and those at risk. But it goes well beyond those businesses because they need support in order to be successful. That's where our partners, our allies, patrons, or customers of these businesses come in to support their growth. So it takes an entire movement, and that's why we like to say it's together that we're creating life-giving work. So we're a global network of enterprises creating healing jobs for survivors and those at risk. And we'd love you to join us. Here's our organization at a glance. We got started in 2015 as a 501c3 nonprofit. But it was only after 2 years of conversations convened among those who were already starting freedom businesses. We came out of the Business as Mission movement, the movement that is also, an offshoot of that is this Lion's Den event here. When several businesses realized, we have the same mission to create these jobs, and others interested in the work that they were doing gathered together and ultimately decided they liked connecting so much they were going to form this nonprofit. Right now, we're sitting at just under 100 freedom businesses operating in 28 countries. By our estimates, there's about 2,000 jobs that have been created. We are at the very beginning of this movement, and we've got a long ways to go. So our mission is to scale the Freedom Business Movement. As Freedom Business Alliance, we want to do those things that no single business can do on its own to see this thing grow, because what we are encountering is this huge need of 40 million people trapped in slavery and this incredibly challenging form of business. So we've got to get strategic and start thinking about how are we going to scale this to really make an impact? And the way we think about it is, as a business, a freedom business gets started, we want to help them be sustainable, which in and of itself is a challenge. We then want to help them grow so that the number of jobs that they're able to create can grow. But to really see this scale, we need to see more freedom businesses get started. So we want to see the number of jobs inside each business increase, the number of freedom businesses increase. And what we foresee is that these businesses are going to begin to influence the businesses in their regions, these trafficking hotspots. And we want to see mainstream businesses open up jobs for survivors and help them also succeed. And we think with that, we will be able to meet the need and achieve this vision, a life-giving job for every survivor of human trafficking and exploitation. We are working to collectively create 100,000 freedom business jobs around the world. So if you think about the place we're starting here at 2,000 and aiming for 100,000, that's what in the business world we call a big, hairy, audacious goal. And it's going to take a lot of doing and a lot of the Lord's leading to get us there. So to give you a picture of what these life-giving jobs are like, because it's not enough just to make a job available. There's a lot of support that goes into it. I want to give you an inside view of one of our freedom business members operating in the Philippines. I've seen that many times. I always have to pull myself together before I go back to speaking. And I think one thing that is incredibly clear, as you heard, is God is at work in these freedom businesses, but that it is very hard work to do this, to do this kind of, we talk about the kingdom being a little upside down from the world, and this is definitely an upside down business model. And so we're hard at work as Freedom Business Alliance trying to figure out how to make it easier, how to offer support, and how to really blow this out. And as a board, after all the connecting that was done in the first years of our formation, out of that came an understanding of just how challenging this was and how challenging it was going to be to grow and scale each business and the movement as a whole. And so FBA took on a larger role within the movement, hired staff. I was the first hire, and we're building out a team. We're at the very ground floor of this. So in addition to connecting, we're now coordinating collective impact across this movement and facilitating the removal of barriers to scale and growth for these businesses, taking on things that no single business can do on its own. The 4 areas that we're operating in are awareness, making sure we do events like this so people can be aware that definitely among the anti-trafficking movement, this is a critical component to the solution. We're researching. So because this is such a new way of doing business and people are doing it by trial and error, that makes for very slow growth. We want to get out there, see what these 100 businesses are doing, and that will feed directly into training where we can have resources that help people get on the path for success from the start, meet them where they're at, and help them grow from there. And the 4th is business development, identifying those market opportunities for collective sales. Because in our instance, more sales equals more jobs created for survivors. We're going to take all of this work that we're doing out into the world with a regional development strategy that we're just now formulating. We have the rough outlines for it, and of course we're anxious to get going when COVID settles and we can do some travel again. But looking at, assessing, and strengthening the businesses that are already in these regions, networking and expanding based on partnerships that we can form, and then see an effect of multiplication in that region as we draw upon employers who are already there and help them open up jobs for survivors as well. some of the regions that are coming up in conversation and that we'll be targeting starting next year. The region of Central America. The rest of these are individual countries: Romania, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Thailand. But like I said, we have member businesses in over 28 countries. I'd love to extend an invitation to each one of you. If you know, I was sitting in a meeting a lot like this one when God kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, lean in, listen, follow up, pursue. And that might be you. You might be called to start one of these freedom businesses. You know, the next simplest step is to go to our website, sign up on our mailing list at freedombusinessalliance.com. If you feel led to take that next step, we're looking for allies, people who come alongside with a little support to help us do the work we're doing at $25 a month, but then you'll be sent our annual magazine with incredible stories from this movement, invited into calls with these freedom business leaders, and get that kind of inside view into the movement. These are all next action steps you can take, and you can come and I invite you to talk to me after this. But for now, I'd like to just open it up for questions, comments, anything you want to fire at me. I'm ready to answer.
Repeat your questions after answer so we can have that recorded.
Yes, absolutely. Anyone with questions or comments? Yeah.
Can you lead us in prayer?
Yes. So he asked for me to lead us in prayer. Let me do that now. Dear Heavenly Father, we gather together right now and lift our hearts up to you and everything that we have just seen. We lift, first of all, the survivors who are struggling in the darkness, who are crying out to you, Lord. We know you hear their cry. We are grateful for those who respond in obedience, who answer your call to be your hands and feet to answer that cry. Father, be with the leaders of these businesses who are intrepid entrepreneurs, holding and furthering the front lines of freedom. We bind the enemy and want to foil all his plans, and may you please protect both the work but also the hearts of these leaders. Lord, I also just ask for wisdom, insight, and understanding. It's going to take your strategies that are so much bigger than ours, your vision that is so much bigger than ours to combat this problem that grieves your heart. Father, I pray that you'll speak into the hearts and minds of each person gathered here, that you will show them, if you have for them a part to play in this global movement, Lord, speak. We praise you, we thank you, and it is in the mighty and matchless name of Jesus that we pray. Amen. Yes.
I may have missed this at the beginning, but are the businesses new businesses, or do you have some people who are like already have a business that want to join in your model?
Right, that's an excellent question. So she's asked, are these all new businesses doing this, or are there existing businesses that have decided to become freedom businesses and create jobs for survivors? The vast majority of these businesses, in fact, I almost cannot think of an exception to it, are businesses formed for this express purpose. That said, there are businesses, even large corporations, who have attempted to open up jobs for survivors to varying degrees of success and unfortunately not so successful, because I think people are willing to open up the jobs. It's all the support that goes around that they are unprepared and unequipped for, and we're hoping to change that, to really understand through research what are the interventions being offered and how might that be replicated in a mainstream place of employment, because to scale, you got to get beyond startup, which is slow growth and prone to failure, and move into some of these larger businesses offering that have very strong levels of support that they could be providing as part of their corporate social responsibility. Yes.
As for what I saw in the video, is there a way that your organization is serving these people pastorally? Like, is there an evangelical dimension to this?
Okay, I love that question. The question was, is there some sort of pastoral support? Is there an evangelical component to what is being done here? And I would say up to this point in the movement, that's been happening, but informal, right? Making connections, having prayer teams, that sort of thing that kind of form on their own. And some of these businesses are sent by their churches, but many of them are not. In fact, I had a conversation with my own pastor ahead of being in this role, but when I was working in Haiti, and he is a gifted evangelist. And I think because of his calling, maybe he only has eyes to see what evangelism looks like in that very traditional sense of going and planning churches and that sort of thing. And when I talked to him, he said, "This is fantastic, but this is not what the church does." And I was so taken aback because I had this strong sense of calling, but I didn't know what to say to my pastor. I didn't even know whether to ask him, "Do you mean that's not what this church does, or that's not what the global church does?" And I think since I am talking to a room full probably of students who many of you may be training to be pastors, we need churches commissioning these business leaders because there's spiritual opposition out there. They are in need of prayer and intercession. And yes, we're looking at how do we create formal, scalable structures for that? And it's a question we don't have an answer, a clear answer for. We have ideas on. So, if any of y'all want to help us work on that, come talk to me. Anyone else? Yes.
In addition to providing a stable job for them to have, what kind of things do businesses come up with in order to help prevent the possibility of re-trafficking?
Yes. Well, you got a little bit of a picture of it there. They're oftentimes providing counseling services in addition to vocational training. They are helping them with what we call soft skills, those things we take for granted that make a good employee, how to show up on time, how to have healthy relationships with authority. If you think about where they've come from, that has not. It's been the opposite, and it takes a while to break through that. How to have healthy relationships with peers. There's often increased medical support. Maybe we see that here in this country as part of your employment package, but it's very distinct way of supporting them there. Helping them with financial acumen, how to open up a bank account. And maybe the most basic, I heard from one freedom business, it took them a year to a survivor they were working with had no legal identity. She didn't have a name. She was not in the system. It took them a year of paperwork to create an identity for her. And if you think about that from a theological standpoint, that's incredible. And that happened because it's a business context. They need that identity to be able to legally employ her. But it's kind of like we've called it before, HR on steroids. We've just authored this year a Freedom Business Code of Excellence, and we came up with a term that sounds a little better than that called a healing-centered workplace. Yes?
Maybe I missed it in the beginning too, but what kinds of, in the video shows, kind of the outsourcing is kind of the service they provide, but is there any other type of, goods that people produce, or, what's kind of maybe that's a huge question, what's the scale of business here?
Right. So the question is, what sectors and industries are most of these businesses in? And the vast majority, I would say 60 to 70% of our existing member businesses are in consumer goods, most especially jewelry, apparel, home goods, health and beauty. And I think that's for a few reasons. One is the vast majority of the leaders of these businesses are women. It's women-led businesses, which is a little atypical of the entire business as mission movement. And they're looking at things that they are familiar with and stories of success out there in social impact businesses in these sectors. The other thing is the barrier to entry from a skill perspective is low. Sometimes they're dealing with survivors who are illiterate or uneducated, and also the repetitive work, while we would find it maybe distasteful and boring, is therapeutic for a survivor. The challenge is these are very crowded sectors to compete in the marketplace, hence the need for increased awareness. Where most people have heard of fair trade, most people have not heard of freedom business, and we want to change that. Some other industries, though, are food and beverage, hospitality jobs, as well as tech. And I would say those are the main three sectors. All sectors which rank almost highest on the level of human trafficking and exploitation in those sectors. So they're literally changing these sectors, flipping them upside down. Yes? Yeah. I think, so the question is, what changes need to take place in order for this to meet with more success in mainstream businesses and corporations? Why hasn't it been successful in the past when it's been tried? And I think it's a huge question, right? A lot needs to change with capitalism. I happen to be a fan of capitalism. There's great books out there, one of which you might check out called Completing Capitalism. It's not that capitalism is a system that is broken or bad. It's just missing some elements. At the root of business is essentially value creation and exchange. And we've simply have a system that only reflects valuing money, and yet the human heart, we are designed to value so much more. And we're just now starting to create the measures and the systems for understanding that and the exchange. So that's part of it, is recognizing what do we truly value, and can our businesses reflect that? Can they be built around that? But I think really at the heart of why this hasn't been successful in mainstream corporations is just a lack of understanding of the support that survivors need. And it's we like to think, oh, these are victims. All they need is an opportunity and they are going to be successful. Actually, sometimes they bring drama with them. They they don't have the soft skills like we talked about showing up to work on time. They have increased conflicts with their peers. They have increased conflicts with authority figures. They're struggling this way. We don't like to think about it like that because we want to think of them as innocent and in need of help, which of course they are. But because of the brokenness and the darkness that they have experienced, they need somebody to walk alongside them on their path to healing and on their path to really readiness for being successful employees. And typical corporations just aren't set up for that.
As far as awareness, is there a place for a church liaison in part of your awareness program? Because I just feel like if the body of Christ can do this, I'm not an entrepreneur. I wish I saw the world like that. I just don't. But I think there are entrepreneurs who are sitting in the pews of churches all across America who go, we can do something about this.
Yes. So the question is, what can churches do? Is there room for church liaison? And absolutely there is. Let's talk. I think that's a brilliant idea. We don't have a church liaison. I think we need one. And I think, IJM has done a really great job they do Freedom Sundays, for instance. And people in the Christian community have really grown in their awareness of human trafficking in general. I think it takes a pastor understanding the role of business. It's like that one extra leap. And I think that statistic of 80% being re-trafficked if they don't have the job is something that supporters of anti-trafficking work should be made aware of. There's a lot of money going into the rescue operations. We need to bring it on par so that job creation is at an equal level. And it would take a church ambassador to kind of speak the pastor's language and put those pieces together as to, hey, if you've done a Freedom Sunday, the story isn't complete yet. Let's talk about what this looks like comprehensively. So yes, love it. Anything else? Well, I see we're just a minute past the hour, and I'll take that as my cue to end.